Thank you so much. Thank you, Carl, and thank you for coming all the way from Afghanistan here. I would like to thank the New York Democracy Forum and everyone who has made it possible for me to be here to have this exchange. What Carl didn't tell you was that the first meeting I had with him, and I had some hesitation. I didn't know what National Endowment for Democracy was all about, you know. And a friend, Mahnaz Afghani, told me, no, go. It's a good place. It's okay. And I went there, and because I didn't know what to do, I thought, you know, I'm going to be talking about Jane Austen. And these people don't seem to be really, you know, interested in Jane Austen. And so that is what I did, really. I went there and I talked about reading Jane Austen in Iran. And after the meeting, Carl, who was the chair of the meeting, came to me and started talking about Lionel Trilling on Jane Austen, when we had a very passionate discussion on Jane Austen and Trilling and all the others, and I knew that he was one of us. And then when, at that time I was going back to Iran, back and forth, and it was very difficult to be able to communicate with National Endowment for Democracy. So we were thinking of ways of doing it, and finally we decided one of my absolute favorite, I can't say artists, one, because there's four of them, is actually Marx Brothers. I fell in love and then fell in love again with Marx Brothers when I went to Iran, actually, when they were part of the forbidden videos that we watched and then our children watched. And so we decided to create this legendary University of Fredonia. And Carl became the president of the University of Fredonia. And I sort of conversed with him through faxes under that title. So this is how fiction can sometimes divert reality. So I'm very thankful to David Lowe and to Carl and to all my friends at NED and now at the New York Democracy Forum. Every time I give a talk, especially nowadays about, this is not a talk about my book, but I keep thinking, you know, people think that this woman must be completely mad. I mean, reading Lolita in Tehran in this day and age, you know, how relevant is Lolita to Tehran? And how relevant is Lolita to New York City or Washington, D.C. for that matter? So I'm here, in fact, to make a plea for Lolita and for Tehran and to tell you why I think both of them in this day and age are in fact central and relevant to the issue of democracy, and not to the issue of democracy in what we say that part of the world, but in fact to the issue of democracy in this part of the world. We live in such a divided times. I mean, you know, you turn on the television and beheadings and murders and prison riots, they have all become part of our daily routine. In the city that I loved, in one city that I loved, Tehran, it becomes a crime to look the way I do. I could be flogged and jailed despite even the openings that we talk about right now. In another city that I love so much and is now my home, Washington, D.C., when we talk about the colors orange and yellow and green, we don't mean the colors of flowers or the colors of someone's dress. We mean the alert, you know, the levels of alert. In places where I would walk freely before 9/11, all the wonderful places like the Library of Congress or the Mall or the Capitol are now blockaded. So every moment you are reminded that now this building, that monument, is a soft or a hard target. This is the kind of world that we live in. And in terms of this country, I was so amazed and shocked and dismayed during the presidential elections when there was so much polarization. I would like to quote one of the, for the time being, immortals of our time, Jon Stewart, whom I sort of, I used to watch Jon Stewart much far before he became so popular and trendy. I might not watch him anymore, but he said something very interesting on Larry King. He was saying that the extreme right and the extreme left have occupied all the spaces for debate. What about us? And in this country, the level of political debate was reduced to whether we call something freedom fries or French fries, to a debate between Swiftboat veterans and Dixie Chicks and Michael Moore. So I think that when we talk about the issue of democracy, we need to look at the others and also look at ourselves. And this is why I think Lolita is important. This is why I think imagination in the kind of world that we live today is important. Because I think that every era you define who you are, partly through who you are, but also partly about how you, ways through which, the style, the form that you use in order to confront those whom you disagree with or those whom you oppose. So we know that in our world today, and in terms of what we call democracies today, one of the fundamental issues that we are dealing with is the issue of fundamentalism, or what we would like to call Islamic fundamentalism. We know that. But how we define that will be defining us. How we will encounter that phenomena will be telling something about how we define democracy today. And in order to define our opposition, or what we call our enemy, correctly, we need to get away from easy formulas, from simplifications, from this soundbite culture, which has penetrated not just our political discourse, reducing politics to a form of politicization, but also, unfortunately, our academic and intellectual discourse. And to fight against that simplification which is in us, not just in them, we need then to go back to the culture of thought and imagination. We need to look at the world through the alternative eyes which sort of dehabitualize the formulas that we accept. For example, just one example, and this is something that we were talking about before this meeting. We are so used to call a variety of cultures and nations and countries with amazingly different backgrounds and histories and traditions as the Muslim world. We feel very comfortable as constantly saying the Muslim world, or Islam, is Islam compatible with democracy? I haven't heard anyone saying, is Christianity compatible with democracy? Is Buddhism compatible with democracy? But Islam compatible with democracy keeps coming up. Now, just remember that one of the first things that imagination, and here I'm here as an apologist in defense of fiction, one of the first things that fiction does is that it differentiates, it particularizes, it brings to your attention the details, the individuals, it avoids and defeats and resists generalizations. So you don't say the Muslim world. You're talking about Indonesia. You're talking about Malaysia, you're talking about Saudi Arabia, you're talking about Turkey, you're talking about Iran, you're talking about Afghanistan. Each of these countries are far more different from one another than France is from Germany, or Germany is from Britain, and Britain is from United States. We don't call these countries Christian countries. So one of the first things that we do once we think of other human beings, not in terms of formulas, but as individual entities, is to restore to these countries their names. I'm not saying their identities. Identity is a very flexible thing, but their names. So that is why I think we need imagination and we need thought, because both knowledge, I mean any form of knowledge, especially imaginative knowledge, is based upon curiosity. And like the simplifications that we're dealing with today, when you think through the eyes of a great writer, when you think through the eyes of a great reader, The urge to read, the urge to write, the urge to paint, all of these urges come out of the urge to know, to investigate. I remember Margaret Atwood in an interview said, they asked her, why do you write? How do you start to write? She said, well, I don't know. There seem to be voices from distant villages beckoning to me. It seems as if I see a bloody hatchet in the middle of the living room, and I ask myself, what's that bloody hatchet doing there? It needs to be investigated. So at the heart of imagination is the desire to investigate, and not just to investigate the others, but to investigate ourselves. And that is why I think that I very much love what Nabokov used to tell his students, that curiosity is insubordination in its purest form. I mean, if you want to be genuinely and not just politically insubordinate, become curious. Because once you become curious and restless, like that little girl named Alice, you are constantly running after things that going beyond appearances, not seeing just a white rabbit, but a white rabbit with a waistcoat and a watch, and a white rabbit who talks. And then once you fall into the wonderland and follow that urge, then of course your reward is seeing the world through the different eyes. Never again would Alice see grass as just grass, a white rabbit as just a white rabbit, a flower as just a flower. So now, still you might ask, what does this have to do with the price of peaches in Alabama? I don't know, or is it Georgia? I keep forgetting. It is through this curiosity that you come to an empathy with others who are not like you. Since we live in an era of political correctness, I would like to say that no amount of political correctness will make us empathize with a slave who lived 200 years ago and whose child was taken away from her under the guise of the fact that these people don't feel the same way that we do. Or with an Afghani woman who was taken to a football stadium and a gun was put to her head and she was shot to death because of the fact that she did not dress properly. We cannot just be politically correct about compassion. The only way we in this room or we in this country feel empathy with a woman in Saudi Arabia or a child in Darfur or a child in Indonesia is through empathy. Through the ability to, as in that book that everyone in this room has read, To Kill a Mockingbird, you remember that the narrator would say, you never know another human being until you wear their shoes and walk around in them. That is what you need to do. And that is what fiction does for you. That is what culture does for you. It puts you in the shoes of those others who seem to be not like you. And once it does that, there is the shock of recognition. Because as Shylock says in Merchant of Venice, if you prick us, we do bleed. And we all bleed. And we all, essentially, as human beings, want the same things, and we are all, essentially, as human beings, capable of the best and the worst. Democracy and terror, human rights and fundamentalism are not the property of the West. They are not geographically or nationally or culturally defined. They belong to all of us. The worst crime in 20th century happened at the heart of European civilization, which was Germany. Another one happened at a neighbor to the European civilization, which was Russia. And of course, this country has been fighting and resisting, first in its war of independence, then through its civil rights movement, reminding us that every culture, every nation, every people are capable of the best and the worst. But the important thing about these cultures is that they also have the right to change. They have the right to say no. Change is the essence of life. So how can we, in the United States, buy into the fundamentalist discourse and say it's their culture? I mean, this is, again, one other thing that I want to question through this talk. So to sort of sum up this part and then move quickly to Iran and then, sum up my discussion, what I want to say is that there is an area, there is a space, there is a republic in which ideological polarizations and politicizations, national, religious, ethnic, gender, class differences and limitations lose their meaning. There is a space in which human beings meet as human beings and connect. Without connections, the word humanity would lose its meaning. And that space is one part of it is what I would like to call the Republic of Imagination. The other part of it is what I would like to call the domain of human rights. And I think that anyone who questions the universality of human rights should be rethinking and re-questioning her own attitude towards freedom and democracy. And then, so this is why I want to make a plea for imagination. But why Iran? There are so many other countries, and each of these countries, of course, by themselves are so important. We should have listened to Carl, who just came from Afghanistan, and then we have the big problem of Iraq right now ahead of us, and the constitution, and the rights of Iraqi people, especially the Iraqi women, which is also at risk. So we have a lot to think about. But why Iran? I think Iran is important for essentially two main reasons. One is that in 1979, when the revolution was hijacked and finally sort of taken over by what we call fundamentalists in my country, it was Ayatollah Khomeini and the theoreticians of that system, that regime, that formulated the idea of a modern theocracy. They were the fathers of what we now call Islamism or Islamic fundamentalism. Afghanistan or Zia-ul-Haq in Pakistan or all these others, they did not have the theoretical, the ideological power which Ayatollah Khomeini did have. And it was since then that Iran was changed from a modern, and actually it was a modern dictatorship, but it was changed from that into a theocracy. And what happened in Iran during the past 25 years? The failure of the Islamic Revolution to reach its goal, the failure of the Islamic Revolution to create a new generation that would be sort of following the flag of Islamism in Iran and the region has very, very important lessons for us. The second thing is that Iran, exactly because it was a very advanced country, exactly because it was a modern country, exactly because its culture was so complicated, its traditions were so contradictory and paradoxical, exactly because of that, it resisted this theocracy, and through that, it came to a self-criticism of itself that no other country in the region has gone through. The interesting thing about Iran is that it has a very vital civil society. It might not be a formulated one as yet, and there might be many obstacles to its realization of its goal, but it is a restless country which for 26 years has questioned the system that was imposed upon it. And of course, we Iranians have to take the responsibility for it. I really disagree with putting all the blame on just the Islamic Republic. These things just don't happen. We a lot of times bring our prosecutors and our butchers on our own shoulders. So we're all answerable for that. So this is the Iran that I want to very briefly talk about. Now, the first thing, what I want to put forward to you is that what we call Islam, in a country like Iran, or what we call Islam, the way fundamentalists today define it, is not religion. It is a religion that has been confiscated by an ideology. If you look at the structure of Iranian system, it is far closer to a totalitarian system like communists under Stalin than it is to anything you would call Islamic. And I will just go very briefly into why I think this. First of all, the way this regime came to power, you know that the first thing a totalitarian system does, it confiscates the past. They have to confiscate the past in order to justify the present. They have to say, this is not the way we were. You look at Hitler's theorizing and going back to the Aryan race and the Germanic gods and all of that. So the past has to be completely negated and denied. Therefore, people like myself and millions of Iranians, where modern Iran essentially was being questioned as alien. And the first thing that this regime attacked were individual rights, alongside of it human rights, and at the center of it the rights of women, and of course culture and minority rights. The first 8 months before the creation of a constitution, or having a president, they annulled the family protection law, which protected women at home and at work. Then Ayatollah Khomeini tried to issue an edict about women veiling, and hundreds of thousands of Iranian women came into the streets protesting against this edict. One of their slogans was, freedom is neither Eastern nor Western, freedom is global. And the Ayatollah had to sort of pull back. He had to retreat from his original statement. Then they brought the Sharia law, which to my horror, when I came to the States, found out so many among the policy experts or the academia, in fact, in some way or another justify. Let me tell you what these Sharia laws are, and they're the same more or less everywhere. First of all, they changed the age of marriage from 18 to 9. Now, any of you who think that it is their culture for a 9-year-old girl to be married to a man 3 times her age, most probably, and at the same time to legalize polygamy and temporary marriages where a man can rent a woman for as many years as he wants to. Any of you who think it's our culture to have this sort of obscenity in our midst, I would like to tell you then it's your culture to burn witches in Salem. Not Thoreau, not Emerson, not Hawthorne, not Melville, but burning witches. Slavery is the culture of Confederate States, not William Faulkner, Zora Neale Hurston, Carson McCullers, or Flannery O'Connor. Inquisition is the culture of Europe, and not St. Augustine or St. Thomas Aquinas. They brought stoning to death. It's shameful in the world we live today that in different parts of the world, governments, states are stoning people to death. You know, and we justify it and go to bed, fine with a clear conscience saying it's their culture. And those people who oppose this culture are Western. This is a great insult to people who call themselves Muslims. It is a great insult to say that the desire for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is an American entity, is a Western entity, that a woman in Nigeria or Afghanistan or Iran does not want to be happy, does not want to pursue happiness. So, I mean, do not think that you are giving us credit by saying that it's their culture. To make a very long story short, the issue of the veil was not the issue of religion. My grandmother, who wore the veil all her life, and refused to come out of her house without the veil, used to cry and say, "This is not Islam. This is not religion." Because for my grandmother and millions of women like her, veil was a symbol of their faith. It was a symbol of their belief. And once the state took over that symbol, it became no more her belief, but an instrument of power, an instrument of state. It is like saying America is a Muslim majority, it will become soon maybe, a Christian majority country. Therefore we reduce Christianity, we reduce America to Christianity, and some people are doing that. And we reduce Christianity to just one aspect of it, say Jerry Falwell. That from tomorrow, all Americans should wear the cross. Would the cross mean anything if I wear it? So this is the issue of the veil in Muslim societies. Don't let anyone intimidate you. You are not criticizing the veil. You are criticizing imposition of the veil upon a whole population. Okay, now Carl talked about culture. Obviously, once you start doing this, then you go into culture. He talked about Desdemona being deleted out of Laurence Olivier's Othello from most of the scenes. What he didn't mention was that they also deleted Othello's suicide on the basis that the masses become depressed. Watching Sir Laurence Olivier commit suicide on screen, they don't become depressed being stoned to death. They say, "Oh, it's our culture. You know, what can we do with it? You know, we have to show the world that, you know, we like to be stoned, but not this man. Don't kill him." Remember in Russia, in Soviet Union, they took the death of Swan out of Swan Lake for the same reason. And they called Sartre and Camus and Hemingway and Faulkner decadent writers who should be forbidden. And remember that fabulous Greta Garbo movie, Ninuchka, where she brings some lingerie from France to the Soviet Union and her roommate becomes scared and she says, "Oh, I don't want my underwear to undermine the state." Okay, so to sum up, I would like to now sum up. I don't want to, you should look at your watches more often. This way I'll know where to end. But I'll just come to a summation. So what I was, the sort of this brief picture, and it is brief, and obviously it is simplified. Things are much more complicated than what I said now. What happened then in Iran? The fact is that for 26 years, Iranian people have been resisting these laws. And for us, Iranians, people think I'm political. I'm not at all political. I wish I could just spend all my time writing and then reading Atwood or Bellow or Rumi. This is what I really want to do. But for us, this fight is existential. Because every totalitarian state, what they target is your identity as an individual, your integrity as an individual. When they force you to wear the veil, it is not that you don't like or like the veil, it's just that it's not you. And so you feel as if you're participating in a lie. This is the worst thing about a totalitarian state, that it makes you complicit in the crime against you. And if you want to know more about it, you should be reading Nabokov's Invitation to a Beheading. Now, the whole point about it is that the way the Iranian people resisted was not through violence. It was not through ideological polarization, which is what we did during the Shah's time. It was through using their weapons of mass destruction, like my lipstick, a bit of hair, reading the Declaration of Human Rights, reading Jane Austen, reading Bellow, talking about debating Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt and Karl Popper are two of the most popular writers in my country. My students know much more about de Tocqueville, unfortunately, than my American students do. Now, and Iranian women became the semiotic signs of protest in the streets of Tehran when they refused to wear the veil, to comply with the mandatory clothing that the regime had asked of them. Young girls and boys would hold hands, they would be taken to jail, flogged, humiliated, beaten, they would come back. and they would repeat it. So what I'm trying to say to you is that this new generation, the children of revolution, they have gone to jail not for any political activity. They have gone to jail in order to keep their right to dress the way they want to wear friendship bracelets, to walk, to read, to talk, to live the way they want to. It is not the elite, but it is the ordinary Iranians today who, through this instinctive feel for the meaning of freedom and pluralism, that are making this regime to retreat step by step. And now in the streets of Tehran, it is the morality police that has disappeared. But the young girls are, as any American journalist would tell you, are looking, as sinful and tempting as any American counterpart that they might have, and more. And one other thing in Iran that happened was that some of the former revolutionaries, some of the former Islamists, they started looking at themselves and at this failed revolution, and they didn't like what they see. And so they started to question their own view of their religion. And now the jails in Iran are not filled with just the seculars, but they are filled with the former revolutionaries, people like Akbar Ganji, who in his unpublished interview and actually in his published articles, the person he talks about most is Hannah Arendt. Whenever he talks about the Islamic Republic, he brings the example of Hannah Arendt's discussion of fascism. And it is now the former revolutionaries, one of them is Act 3, was just talking in Washington last Sunday. Another one, Mohsen Sazegara, is right now in Washington Institute. Of course, I think that someone like Sazegara needs to look at his own past and talk about it and criticize it much more than he has done. But anyway, these are the people who now are talking about secularism, about a referendum, about change in their country. And that is why people ask, should there be art, with Adorno they say, should there be art after Auschwitz? There can only be art after Auschwitz, actually. If you read the memoirs of the concentration camps, both Stalin's and Hitler's, if you read a person like Primo Levi, you wonder, what is it that make a people who are deprived of everything that they have, who are at death's door, to think like Primo Levi did, that to remember lines from Dante in order to repeat them to his fellow prisoners was more important to him than the daily ration of his bread. I had two students, I talk about them in my book. One of them was a strict Islamist who fell in love with Henry James and with Henry James's women. Her name was Razieh. And I talk about a scene where one of my students who was in jail with Razieh came and told me, she said, I was in jail with her and we realized that you had been teaching both of us. I talked to her about Gatsby and she talked to me about James. And then she said, you know, Razieh was executed. And I thought, how amazing. It would be only a Gatsby or a James who would be deserving to go with a young girl to her death. That it is not just in places like this where Gatsby and Twain and Shakespeare thrive, but in those places. Because those people who have been deprived of the right to individuality, of the right to integrity, in times of greatest brutality, in order not to lose their faith in humanity, they go back to the highest achievements of that humanity. And the highest achievements of our humanity is our philosophy, our thought, our novels, our poetry, our music, our painting, those aspects of human life that fights not just political tyranny, but the tyranny of time, and those aspects which celebrate every individual, every moment, every detail of life. That is why Lolita, the most apolitical of novels, became so important in my country, Iran, because Lolita is about the confiscation of another human being's life and the imposition of a tyrant like Humbert's dream upon a little girl named Lolita's life. And that is what they did to us. So I want to end my talk by saying that I'm very hopeful about Iran. Of course, hope always comes with a big question mark. There are so many ifs. I think Iran is the case model for democracy today. And I think that you will be able to help my country, and you will be able to help promote democracy in your own country by supporting the issues that the Iranian people right now are fighting for. However, having said that and having talked so much, I don't want to end with Iran. I want to end with here. I want to end with a great writer. You know, since last August, we've witnessed the death of some of the best minds of this past century. There was Miloš, one of the most important poets and human rights advocates for Eastern Europe and the whole world. There was Susan Sontag, there was Arthur Miller, and now Saul Bellow. I think it would have been fitting for us to come in front of New York Public Library and other public libraries and celebrate the lives of these people. I think it was more fitting to remember them than to flock to television sets to watch Prince Charles's wedding. So I want to end with the name of these people. And I want to end with the great Saul Bellow, whom my students in Iran loved, absolutely. They wrote poems to him and paintings for him. Bellow was always worried about the ordeal of freedom in his own country. In More Die of Heartbreak, Dean's December and Bella Rosa connection, he says, "We survived the ordeal of the Holocaust. Will we survive the ordeal of freedom?" And he talked about the atrophy of feeling in the West. The fact that we lose our consciousness to the bombardment of, the simplifications and some sound bites and politicization. And he said, a country that forgets about its poetry and its soul is a country that faces death. This is what we bring to you from my country. We remind you of Saul Bellow, of Jane Austen, and of the fact that they are the universal property of all humankind. And that in order to celebrate democracy, you cannot celebrate it without celebrating your poets. Thank you for your time. books. In my country, I remember one filmmaker, Bahram Beyzai, once said, everybody wants me as a filmmaker to promote their cause. Nobody is saying, you promote your cause as a filmmaker. A democracy means that we don't reduce any field to another. And we don't reduce filmmaking or writing or teaching or fiction to our political agendas. And I think that that is something that is happening. We need to go back to reading from Machiavelli to Plato to de Tocqueville and apply these theories to our world today, I think. I'm sorry that this is too generalized. Every university I go, or high school, I say, start creating your own subversive book groups. And, start doing something which is not expected of you to do.
Salam Khanum Nafisi. Thank you for your remarkable book. I enjoyed it when I read it. I have one question, and I'd like you to clear one other thing. One is the issue of a veil is a very hot button issue. And in Iran, the Islamic Republic wasn't the first government who imposed the veil.
No.
As you know, Shah's father imposed the other way. Yeah. Also, this is true for Turkey now. They impose,
Yeah.
How you take a stand on that?
Well, I have taken a stand against that publicly, actually, the first time in Iran, when at the University of Tehran, the issue of making the veil mandatory came up. And I mentioned to them that when Reza Shah imposed the veil, imposed taking off the veil, my grandmother refused to leave home for 3 months. And the whole issue of the veil is that it is the issue of individual freedoms, and no government, including Turkey or any other government in the world, has a right to tell a woman how to believe. The only thing that I worry about, along with my grandmother, is when we politicize the veil. We take away its religious meaning and its religious significance. I don't think anyone has a right to tell a woman not to wear the veil because of whatever reason.
And I just want to ask you one quick question that, I read on the internet that you support the military intervention in Iran that is being pushed by Luke.
I support it?
I know it was a rumor, and I want to just ask you if that's the case.
Well, yes, rumors are... I have a few names too. But if you, I try to, unlike some people, I try to be as public as possible with everything that every stance that I make. In article after article, in my talks, I have very, very specifically have said that intervention is not the road to democracy in Iran or anywhere for that matter. I think that, first of all, I think that the change in Iran will come from within Iran. And I don't think that the change in Iran is just a matter of regime change. It is a matter of democracy. Democracy is a process, and the ends do not justify the means. What I am for, no matter what administration is in power, is to support the human rights of Iranian people. And I'm also, for the record, I'm not against exchange or dialogue with the Iranian government. I think exchange and dialogue should exist between governments, only we should know what we're exchanging or dialoguing about. And we should not compromise Iranian people's rights for the sake of any exchange. But all these witnesses here, I am against intervention in Iran. And I'm just a human being. I do not belong to any political group. And it's just one person. So I don't think I'll have much effect on anyone, really. Any politician.
We had two questions here before you took the mic there, so let me take these and then we'll conclude with your question over there, please.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say